this is all good stuff that we should be using.
So funny.
Mighty Merp is available on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite apps and players. But the best way to experience the show is to visit mightymerp.com, where you can subscribe, rate, or submit a voice message to the show.
All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon. I'm not sure what to say yet. Give me a second. Welcome to the Mighty Merp podcast. I'm very excited today. I have a guest that I'm excited to speak to. It's Megan McCormick Hoerner, who is a criminal attorney in the Atlantic, Cape May, and Cumberland area of New Jersey. She is a certified criminal trial attorney. She has been a district attorney in Philadelphia. She has been a prosecutor in Cape May County and now in private practice. Meg, welcome to Mighty Merp, and I'm very excited to talk to you.
Oh, I am so excited to be here. Thank you very, very much for having me as, I think I'm your first guest. I don't know.
You are
one of the
officially,
first
no,
guests.
you
I
are,
appreciate that.
You are officially the first guest, but I'm not sure if you're going to be the first episode. So
that's okay. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is fun. I hope this is the first of many times that I can be a guest on your podcast.
Well, I hope so too. And for our audience or listeners, Meg and I are both criminal defense attorneys, and we talk often about cases, business, just a lot of similar areas that we have in common. But before we jump into our conversation today, I wanted to ask you if you would share a little bit about your origin story, sort of how you ended up in private practice, why you went to law school, kind of the how you got here in a quick, what's Meg's origin story?
Got it. Okay. So I feel like it's like the Marvel movies, the origin story of Meg. So I grew up in Bridgeton. I'm a Bridgeton High School graduate, class of 88. I ended up at Ursinus College, which was my father's alma mater. And I was an economics major, and I had an emphasis in accounting. I always, liked the numbers and all of that. And when I got out of college, I worked for just a year for Bowman and Company, which was a local accounting firm doing auditing. Really wasn't very happy. I'd always had an idea that, I loved, even though I was an economics major, I loved government classes and politics classes, and I always had this fascination with the idea of going to law school. So I had been out of college for about a year. I was married, and I was trying to decide if I was going to go to law school or if I was going to get my teaching certificate.
So I'm going to interrupt and ask, are you the first lawyer in your family?
In my immediate family, yes. My father is very close with his cousin, Paul Kenzel, who is a lawyer. And so, but in my immediate family, yes, my parents were in education. And so there were no, I was the first lawyer in the McCormick family.
And probably why you were in between education and law, right?
Absolutely. And I still think education is such a great career. I mean, I had such a wonderful childhood, in large part because, my parents were on the same schedule as we were. My brother and I have a brother who's 7 years younger than me. He's actually an attorney. He and his wife were both attorneys. But they'd be home from work at the same time as we were. And my dad was an English teacher and then went into guidance counseling and ended up retiring as the head of guidance for a local high school. My mom started out in public nursing and then ultimately spent most of her career as a school nurse, although she later got a degree in counseling and did some hospice work later on. But growing up, she was a school nurse. My dad was a teacher and then a guidance counselor. And so weekends off, afternoon, early dinners, summers off. It was really a great way to have, to have a childhood and to grow up. And so I think you're absolutely right. I really struggled with whether or not I wanted to be a teacher or whether or not I wanted to go to law school. And so I did not have a teaching certificate, and at that time, I think they still have it. They had a program called the alternate route, and you had to take a test. So I took the test for the alternate route.
Do you know I did that too, Meg?
Did you really?
I did. I'm going to let you talk about your alternate route experience, and I'll share a little bit about mine afterwards. But I did do the same thing after, but I did it after law school.
Every time we speak, there's some little tidbit that we never knew that's a similarity, which I just think is really neat and interesting.
Yes.
But so I took the test for the alternate route. I also at the same time took the LSATs, which is the test you have to take before you go to law school. And I'm really not a very good test taker. I'd taken a course, like a night course or whatever. I really didn't do that great on the LSATs. And it was almost like a flip of the coin. I couldn't decide, and I thought, you know what, I will always regret it if I don't go to law school. So, and at that time, we're talking like the early 90s, like 1990, 1991. At that point in time, it was difficult to get a job as a teacher. And I was a little bit discouraged to go into education for that reason. Of course, not like now where teachers are in such great need.
Correct.
But in any event, I ended up just making the decision to apply to law school. I had at that point taken a job as a filing clerk at the U.S. Bankruptcy Court, which was actually a really good paying job. It was a federal job. And
federal jobs are great. Federal jobs.
Yeah, and I decided to go to school at night, which was only an extra year. So I was newly married. We had bought a house in Washington Township. I had, started this job at the U.S. Bankruptcy Court, and I had applied to Temple, Widener, and Rutgers. I had not heard whether or not I was going to get into Rutgers, and I had been accepted at Widener. And I got a call. I remember sitting at this little cubicle, and I got a call from the folks at Widener. This is like pre-internet, I think, even, or right around when the internet started. And they said, hey, we're starting this new program. You could actually start in a few weeks. It's called the Spring Accelerated Program, SAP. You can complete 1 year of your evening division between January and August. And then by September, which was when I was originally planning on starting anyway, you will be in your second year. I really wanted to go to Rutgers because it was closer. I was, working in Camden. It was obviously cheaper. I called Rutgers. They hadn't made a decision. They said, look, go to Widener. If you do well, you can transfer. And that's exactly what I did. I went to Widener. I finished a whole year of the Spring Accelerated Program between January and August while I was working full time. Did well, transferred to Rutgers, and spent the next 3 years at Rutgers going at night. And it was really hard. I really would not recommend it to anyone ever.
Right. Well, I went to Widener for law school and was going to transfer. I had the grades to do that, but I loved Widener. I had an extremely positive law school experience. I did go full time. I would not recommend. I mean, I understand financially for a lot of people that's what they need to do, but it is hard. It is hard to work full time and go to law school, I'm sure.
All I did for 4 years was basically, every waking minute was spent reading and studying. So it was very challenging. Obviously, in hindsight, I'm glad that I did it. I really wouldn't recommend it. But I think, as I mentioned to you a few minutes ago before we started recording, when I was in law school at Rutgers, they had a program there which was called the Tax Honors Certificate. And because I had been, an economics major at Ursinus, and I had an emphasis in accounting, while I was in law school, I decided to sit for the CPA exam. So I studied for the CPA exam also while I was in law school. And I remember listening to these cassette tapes in the car, driving back and forth to law school. And they were total tapes. That was the name of them. I wonder if they're still in existence. But I ended up passing the CPA exam. I never really practiced as a CPA because there's a whole bunch of stuff you have to do after you pass the exam. But I did pass the exam while I was in law school. So I ended up taking a lot of tax classes in law school. And Rutgers had this tax honors program. And what that enabled you to do was to graduate with 12 credits towards an LLM. So when I graduated from Rutgers, I worked for a year for Arthur Andersen as a state and local tax attorney. They had consultants. And
did you like the tax classes in law school?
I did. At that point in time, I did. I still like, as you know, just fast forward a little bit. When I was a prosecutor, I handled a lot of financial cases. The numbers cases make sense to me. I like the definitiveness of it all. Numbers don't lie.
That's so funny because I get the pragmatic side of it, of like, it's there, it's in black and white. But I always say, because the financial crimes and those type of crimes, they're so paper intensive. And it is like going through everything with a fine tooth comb and like really checking that the numbers all add up for,
Right.
It's the best way to say it. I prefer just a good old-fashioned gunpoint robbery.
That's funny. Exactly. Well, yeah, sometimes they are a lot more straightforward, sometimes not. But I love bankers' boxes full of records. I can organize them and go through them. Yeah, it's probably probably my OCD kicks in or whatever. But
so you thought you were going to be an attorney that handled numbers, taxes.
I thought I was going to be a tax attorney. I ended up leaving Arthur Andersen and working for almost 3 years for Stradley, Ronan, Stevens and Young, which is a large law firm in Philadelphia. And because of my accounting background, I ended up getting a job with them first in their tax department, and they paid for me to get the rest of my LLM, and then I transferred to their estates department and worked there for a bit. But it really wasn't for me. I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. And at that point in time, I had moved to Philadelphia, bought a house in Philly, and I had.
Did you have your daughter yet, or no?
No,
okay.
no. This is all pre-kids. So at this point, we're into right around 2000, and I went to a gym, World Gym, met a bunch of guys that were working at the Philadelphia DA's office who were having a blast. And I never even took criminal procedure in law school. You have to take criminal law, but I had no background whatsoever in criminal procedure, anything like that. I'd been an attorney for 4 years now. I had about a year at Arthur Andersen, about 3 years at the law firm. And I picked up the lawyer's diary one day and opened up to the Philadelphia DA's office. And I had actually, right at that time, read a book written by Buzz Bissinger. I still have it on my shelf, called Prayer for a City, or Prayer for the City.
Oh, yes, for Philadelphia.
And
that book is all about Philadelphia, yes.
It is. There's 4 sections, and one of the sections in the book is about the DA's office. And I was fascinated with that. I'm very idealistic, and I like to think I could make a difference. And I was a bit disillusioned with the work that I was doing.
That's why you should have gone to the public defender's office.
Right, I could, and then we would have met earlier.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Mighty Merp podcast. This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance. Mighty Merp is a production of the Law Office of Melissa Rosenblum and the Niche Podcast Network.